What's up, everybody? Steve here. We're going to talk about 15 things that most people, including real estate agents, will not tell you about buying your first home. Now, if you guys are buying a home for the first time, you're going to want to probably take notes and then utilize these notes when you guys are sitting down with your real estate agent before you guys get out there and start your home buying purchase. These are in no particular order, so let's dive in. All right, number one, first thing is, I do highly recommend that you guys retain a real estate agent to work on your behalf in finding you a piece of real estate. In many cases, this is not going to cost you anything, which leads me into my first tip is if it is going to cost you something from a buyer's agent, that's number one, is we want to find out exactly what they're going to charge. Many times they have what's called a transaction fee or a office fee. The next thing that many people are not going to tell you when you're buying your first home is to really sit down and look at your finances and live within your means. Look, I get it. It's an exciting time. You're excited to buy a property. And one of the first things that you're going to do if you're financing is you're going to go and sit down with a lender to see how much you guys qualify. Now, astonishingly, majority of Americans, over 33% of their money goes to their housing expenses, which is incredibly high. I recommend everybody live below their means so they have money left over every single month to go ahead and reinvest into different assets. Now, I highly recommend when you do sit down with your mortgage broker, let's say that you guys are pre-approved for $250,000, break down the math, see exactly where you're comfortable with, and maybe if you guys get a mortgage instead of a $250,000 mortgage, maybe a $200,000 mortgage may suffice, get you into the right property, and also leave additional money to reinvest at the end of the day. The third thing is buying your first home can be a very emotional process. And as a real estate broker, being in the business for many years, I can tell you a lot of people do get very high strung. They get stressed out. They get emotional. So what you want to do is you want to prepare yourself and you want to prepare your family going into this, because many times you are going to face certain hiccups. Many times you are going to maybe get outbid on a certain property. And unfortunately, many times things are just outside of your control. So you want to make sure that you're going into this and being as stressless as possible, because it could be somewhat of a roller coaster depending on certain circumstances. And speaking of emotional, especially in this market that we're in right now, we are facing a low supply of inventory. And when there's a low supply of inventory, a lot of times there's going to be multiple offers, multiple competition for your property. So that can add to stress. That can add to a lot of high emotions when you're searching for your first home. So be sure, if you guys are in a market, searching in a market, and there's low inventory and there's multiple competition, that you guys are prepared to get outbid. And also you guys are working with your real estate agent to be strategic in your offers. Prime example, if you guys really want a specific property, maybe putting more money down in escrow will help that offer. Maybe a smaller inspection period would help that offer. Maybe a quicker financing contingency would help for that offer. So there are other things besides a higher price that can help support and make you have a stronger offer when you're buying your first home. Number 5, we want to talk about all the expenses associated with home ownership. Let's just jump into a quick example. So let's talk total expenses. Look, whenever I'm evaluating a piece of real estate as an investment property or even my personal home budget, I break down everything as closest to the dollar as possible to get my real expenses, because there's a lot of maybe hidden expenses that you might not be thinking about for home ownership. So let's talk about it. Let's say you got a loan for $225,000 at 4% interest over 30 years. Your principal and interest over that 30-year period monthly is $1,074. Now remember, you got real estate taxes, call it $200. You got insurance, call it $200 a month. Electric bill, let's call it $150. You might have water and sewer bill, let's call it $75. Internet and cable, let's call it $125. lawn, HOA, maybe there's a pool service, whatever the case is, let's call it another $250. That's $2,074. So basically, when you sat down with your mortgage broker, you guys are talking about a $1,100 monthly payment. But when you take in consideration all the other expenses, you almost increase your monthly expense by $1,000. Now, this does not include any kind of deferred maintenance. All right, for the next 5, look, make sure that whatever you do, you guys are consulting with the right people in your state as well, because everything does change from state to state. So you guys want to make sure that you guys have the right professionals helping you guys out. The next thing we're going to jump into are real estate taxes. So for example, in Florida, real estate taxes are paid in arrears, meaning you guys pay the real estate taxes after the year has already been completed. And now when you guys buy the piece of real estate, and let's say the real estate in the state of Florida has been homesteaded, which we'll talk about in a second, if that property has been homesteaded, the stated amount of taxes on that property is going to be different than what you guys are going to have. So you got to make sure that you guys are being realistic and talk to your mortgage broker about this as well. You want to be realistic as to what the predicted amount of real estate taxes will be when you guys purchase that property, because odds are it's going to be higher than the last owner. The next thing is inspection. In the state of Florida, we have what's called the FAR as is contract, where essentially during that due diligence period, during that inspection period, you can back out for any reason. Usually one of 3 things will happen. You have the ability to completely back out, go your separate way. You have the ability to maybe negotiate a credit. You have the ability to negotiate certain repairs that the seller is going to do. Or actually a 4th thing is a combination of a credit and a repair. So make sure that when you guys are buying your property, for one thing, I highly recommend that you guys do hire a reputable inspection company to inspect the property. And also, there are other inspections that might need to take place in your area. So for example, in the state of Florida, you know, we have high humidity in South Florida, so a lot of people will elect to get mold testing. Also, we have what's called radon gases, so a lot of people will have the radon testing as well, where they put a machine inside your house to test the level of radon to see if it's high or low or whatever the case is. So you might have to get additional inspections. Let's say there's a pool, you might want to have a specific pool contractor go out and inspect the pool, because many times the inspector is a general inspector. They usually will pick up a lot of things, but they're not necessarily specialized in, say, HVAC or a pool or whatever the case is. Number 8, escrow. Look, I gotta make this clear. In most cases, in most states, as soon as you put money into escrow, that escrow is jeopardized. Now, per the contract, legally, in many cases, it shouldn't be jeopardized, and you should be able to have what's called a release and cancellation and get the escrow back if you guys are within your deadlines for certain things per the contract. However, that doesn't mean necessarily that all sellers are going to sign off on that release and cancellation in the state of Florida anyway. So if the seller in the state of Florida, if the seller doesn't agree for whatever reason, even though contractually you're in the right, and the seller doesn't sign off on that, that escrow could be sitting in there until you guys come up with some sort of agreement, or you get the, grease the seller a little bit just to sign off and give them a few bucks or whatever the case is. So it's important to understand that when you guys are putting money into escrow, in many cases, again, check with your local real estate attorney. In many cases, that escrow will be jeopardized in some fashion. But per the contract, contractually, you should be safe depending on your deadlines, which we'll talk about next. Deadlines. It's extremely important that you guys are following your deadlines to a T within the contract. Make sure your real estate attorney or your real estate agent is providing you a copy of all the deadlines from that contract, and make sure that you guys are within those deadlines. So for example, if in the state of Florida, if you're on an as-is contract and you have 10 days for inspection, and within that 10 days, the house is a mess, too big of a project for you guys, you want to get out of the contract, you got to make sure within that 10-day period you guys are sending over the release and cancellation in order to get your escrow back. Other deadlines might include title work, financing contingencies, and escrow, to give you guys some examples. The next thing, when you guys are buying real estate, do not buy anything. Number one, you want to stack your money into your bank account. If you guys are spending money on things that you don't need to buy right now, that's going to deplete your bank account and it could hurt your financing. Another thing is you do not want to finance anything when you guys are trying to obtain financing for a home. This could ultimately kill the deal for you guys, and we have seen it in the past where we've seen it in the past where people actually go and they finance a car while they're actually in the process of getting financing for a home and completely squash the deal even after we've specifically gone through this information. So be sure, if you guys are buying your first home, do not finance anything, and be very nimble and be very conservative on spending anything during this time period. All right, number 11, we talked about deferred maintenance. Look, if you have a good inspector, he or she, they're going to be able to find out the age of certain things, including your roof, water heater, HVAC, and so forth. And all these things have a life cycle. They have an expiration of their life. So let's say you guys buy a property and a water heater is getting toward the end of its life. You got to make sure you guys do account for a new water heater in the future if you guys close on the property. And you should get, during your due diligence period, you should get estimates as to what this is going to cost. So let's say a water heater installed is $1,000. You're going to want to make sure that that deferred maintenance item is going into a reserve account, as we previously mentioned. Number 12, Homestead Exemption. In the state of Florida, we have what's called the Homestead Exemption. In your state, you might have something similar, but essentially in the state of Florida, you actually have the ability to reduce your real estate taxes because it is your primary residence. And if you're a married couple, it actually goes down even further. And let's talk about homestead real quick as well. If it is your primary residence, keep in mind, and I have other videos on this as well, keep in mind that if you live in your property at your homestead for 24 months, let's say you bought a rusty property, you fixed it up, and you sold it after 2 years, you sell that property, you don't pay any taxes on that gain. This is tax law, it's a federal law, so you guys want to check with your accountant and your real estate attorney and talk further about that if you intend on maybe flipping your primary residence. I have another video on that as well. I'll put the link down below for you guys so you can check that out as well. Number 13, closing costs and prepaids. Look, any lender, if you guys are financing, is going to require that you guys have a certain level of prepaids. Prepaids are basically prepaying a certain amount of real estate taxes and insurance in most cases. There's also certain closing costs associated with it outside of the prepaids, including mortgage-related closing costs and maybe even certain taxes in your state. So you're going to want to get a good idea from your lender as to what all the closing costs are, and also you might even be able to have the seller pay for your closing costs. So in the state of Florida, if somebody came to us and they're buying a property, we would actually put in the additional terms that the seller will contribute up to 3% of the purchase price to go toward their closing costs. So that could be an option for you guys in your state. Again, talk to your real estate attorney, talk to your mortgage broker, and talk to your realtor. Number 14, and this irks me, but I think that every real estate agent as well as lender needs to talk to every first-time home buyer about the 15-year and the 30-year mortgage and really get them on the right path to succeed financially. If you've been watching this channel for any time at all, I'm all about personal finance responsibility and becoming debt-free and financially independent. So let's talk about the 15-year and the 30-year real quick. So again, on the example, a $225,000 mortgage, the 30-year principal and interest payment is just under $1,100 a month. Now, if the rate gets reduced by 0.5 point, okay, because usually the 15-year mortgage is actually going to be a lower interest rate. So let's just say that it went from 4% to 3.5% over 15 years. That would be basically $1,600 a month principal and interest, and you'd be paid off in 15 years. Now you might be saying, well, I'm comfortable with the $1,100 a month payment, not $1,600 a month. I get it. So here's what you want to do if you guys want to get ahead financially is instead of, because you're pre-approved for 225, instead of going for a property of that size, that caliber, if you got a loan for $175,000 at 3.5% interest on a 15-year, you're at $1,251. So basically $1,250 a month. And again, because you lived within your means, you bought a smaller property, maybe it's not the most updated property, whatever the case is, you could be potentially paid off in 15 years if you went into that circumstance. So again, I'm all about being fiscally responsible, and one of the biggest things that could help you in your wealth and your growth is to pay off your mortgage where you live. Again, the mortgage expense, your home expense for the average American is 33% of their money goes to that. So imagine if you guys no longer had a mortgage, you're able to stack that money away and buy investment properties. And number 15, I encourage you guys to go on your hunch and use common sense. If it doesn't feel right, take a step back. Just take your time. If your real estate agent is a little shady and they're trying to push you into property and you're not feeling it, you might need another real estate agent. If the house that you're in contract just doesn't feel right after you guys have been through inspections and you're trying to renegotiate and it's not feeling right, then it might not be the right house for you guys. If it doesn't feel right, odds are it's probably not right. So make sure that you kind of try to remove certain emotions of the excitement about a property and really concentrate on what's going on and what really matters. Because look, let's say you guys buy a property and you love the property, but the roof is near the end, but you're so excited about the property and you're kind of paycheck to paycheck, you don't have a whole lot of money, and the inspection says there might be another 3 years or 5 years left on that roof, but all of a sudden you're in that property and 18 months later it starts leaking down. You're gonna have a bigger headache on your hands than if you guys just took your time, maybe backed out of that property and went on to another property. Anyway, guys, if you guys got any value out of this, I appreciate a big thumbs up. And look, if you guys like real estate, personal finance, you guys want to get ahead in life financially, then I encourage you guys to subscribe to this channel and check out some of these other videos I have coming at you next. Thanks a lot.